before I get into it, here's some general tips. Since in the Discords, if you do O-freeze, there's so many players that it's really hard to see, so sometimes it's worthwhile standing just outside of the group so you're able to dodge better, until the feature of player transparency comes out. Secondly, don't bring items that you're not willing to use. You should be only bringing tradable gear, in my opinion. If you're a beginner to it, you don't have to bring an 8/8. You can just bring a character that meets the minimum requirements of the Discord, because if you learn it on a bad class, like a bad character with bad items, you'll be able to demolish it on one with better items. The classes that I recommend for beginners would be Paladin, Priest, or Warrior. And also another general tip, avoid moving unnecessarily, because it can make you tank unnecessary damage. So now I'll go through the mini bosses for you, and the things that you should avoid the most. Firstly, arguably the easiest of the 4 mini bosses is Gemsbok. You know when you have him because the carpets are yellow when you enter the Oryx Sanctuary? Basically, this boss likes to stand in the middle, but he also likes to teleport in one of the 4 other platforms on the sides of the map. So what Discords usually do is they go into one corner, I think normally it's bottom left, and they stand still, parrying all of the health effects that might happen, and they also decoy the boss with Trickster ability, so that the boss doesn't shoot towards the group. But if he does, make sure to stand outside of the attacks. They go into a line so they're fairly easy to fit through. Be careful, because at some stage he'll start swirling his staff thing, and when he does that, he goes into a rotation phase where you're forced to move around with the boss and he's undamageable. So you just have to wait that out and group up with the group afterwards. Then in the last phase, he goes through a bit of a rage phase at 20-ish% health. What happens is he'll start shooting grenades every 45 degrees, and then it would take turns between the shots. So there'll be sicken grenades, which is the thing you most want to dodge, because then you wouldn't be able to heal. And that's about it for the yellow boss. Second easiest in my opinion would be Basil. This boss is unnecessarily slow and jumps around annoyingly, but basically with this boss, it's really straightforward. All throughout the boss, you don't want the boss to stand on you, you don't want the minions to stand on you. Also, a way that I see a lot of people die is they like to move in a line, collecting all of the shots from the boss or minions, so they die even at a long range from the boss and minions. So watch out for that, try not to move too much around enemy shots. Also, at some stage, the minions start shooting out these birds. The birds literally insta-kill you. At some stage they like pop out an explosion, so make sure you don't stand on them. This boss literally comes down to don't get sat on by the boss and don't sit on the minions. Now for Luke Oryx, however you say his name, the blue boss. It's pretty straightforward again. His first and third phases are basically the same, and the second and fourth phases are basically the same. The second of each is a harder version of the first ones. So on the first and third phases, what he does is he stands on the side of the room. He just shoots quite casually, and then what happens is these big orbs travel towards him, and when they do, he starts a rage phase. So you want to start shooting the big orbs once you see them coming. They have a HP bar and they're able to be killed. If they do reach the boss, however, you have to do a bit of dancing, because what happens is he shoots sickened shots and he also shoots lined lightning. So you just have to learn the animation of the lightning. On screen you'll be able to see the animation of the lightning, so just make sure to remember it really well. After the lightning's gone down and splashed, you can step on it. It's actually really easy, the rage phase. I don't know how so many people have been dying to it. You literally just have to move every 3 seconds or so, or 2 seconds. Then on the second and fourth phases, it's quite similar except he stands in the middle. He shoots these tentacles around, so you can leech on the sides, however it's going to be a long slow fight. But if you're in a Discord, they'll do the damage for you. But if you want to help, you can rotate with the boss. If you stand at the bottom left of the boss-ish, it will show on screen. You can actually start with the rotation, so that way you don't start in the tentacle and get insta-killed, but you would be forced to escape if a big orb comes, because they're harder to kill while he's middle, because if the big orb is approaching the boss from the opposite side, the non-piercing classes can't shoot it, so it's more than guaranteed to go into a rage phase. Also, watch out for these chandeliers that rotate around the boss. If you stand on one while it starts shooting, you're gonna die very quickly. Lastly, the red boss called Dharma is probably the hardest one. This boss has a lot of unique phases, I think 8 in total, much more than the others. However, there's only a few that you should really worry about, especially in a massive group with healers. So on the very first phase, if people shoot him and they interrupt his little speech, the first phase will actually also have you be sickened, which is unable to be purified. So that means you have to do a really good job at traversing through the knife maze. Only a couple of shots will kill you, so it's very important that you do really well because you won't be able to heal up from other priests or from your HP pots. Then, most of the phases till then are extremely easy. The next hard phase after that is the miasma phase, except if you're in a group you'll get purified there as well. However, generally throughout this whole boss fight you just want to dodge as many green shots as you can. The green shots will be the ones that hurt the most because if there's a bit of time where you don't get purified by the priests that are in your group, you can drop quite quickly because of the lack of healing. The boss also spawns oval-shaped portals. Make sure you don't stand on them as they get sent out because they can shoot a lot of shots and kill you really fast or instantly. In the last 2 phases involving portals, you don't actually have to worry about moving too much. It usually gets safe spotted. So just try to survive after you deal a decent amount of damage. At this point, if you got a white bag or an ST from the boss, consider nexusing if you don't want to risk your items. But if you watch this guide, I'm sure you'll do a dandy fine time at surviving through O3. So basically Oryx 3 comes down to 10 phases which are really easy to remember. During the first half of the boss fight they're all quite weak, but during the second half of the boss fight where he turns white, that's where it can be very tough. So the first 2 phases are the rotating phases. He has one where he rotates more inwards, and one that he rotates more outwards. Don't worry about these at all while the boss is black, but when he's white, if you're following with him, the rotating phases are the best time to do damage, so discords will often pressure you to do damage while he's in this phase, but if you're rotating very close to him, you might be catching a lot of bullets from him, and it can be quite dangerous. So let him pass if he closes the distance with you, and wait for him to recircle. Then there's 2 sword phases. There's one where he sends out these like waves of slashes. If you're a melee class, it's really hard to hit. It's only quite easy if you're a ranged class. And if there is a marble seal, it makes it a lot easier. But you can sit out of this one. Also, the second sword phase is one where he shoots out quiet shots and he starts chasing to the closest character. But it's also quite easy, except in exalted phase, you can get cornered. So keep your distance if you like. One big tip while going into Oryx, try to avoid pet stasis and sicken as much as possible. Then there's the 3 phases that are easiest to get damage on while he's black. There's one phase where he shoots out these orbs that explode, but they do very little damage, so you can get really good damage on him during this phase, even when he's white. You can safe spot this phase by standing diagonally and rotating slightly each time he shoots out a few of the orbs, but either way, it does really low damage. Then there's the sick and bomb phase. With this phase, usually the whole group just likes to stand on him while he's black. It can be a lot tougher when he's white. I would just stand away as much as you can. With the sick and bomb phase, otherwise there's actually safe spots that you can stand in. You have to first go to his right for the first lobby, then to the left, then above him, and then below him. That way you can dodge all of them. However, if he's white and there's the pet stasis portal circling, it's a lot harder to be able to stand in those safe spots confidently. Then the third phase that's really easy to get damage on while he's black is the meteor phase. Basically on the floor, it's going to signal these small dots where explosions will spawn. If you stand on them, there's a high chance you get insta-killed, so make sure you stand away. But it's quite easy to dodge because it's really forecasted, and once it does explode, the shots are really slow, so you can fit between them. Then he has a shield bash phase where he basically runs in a line that's slightly based on the player's placements. I recommend not attacking too much during this one, especially if you're melee and you're newer, but he like bounces off the walls. Then there's 2 tornado phases. There's one where he stands still and fires out a lot of shots during the whole duration of the phase, and then there's one where he's more aggressive where he tries to jump towards you. While he's black, it's not too hard to get damage on. However, while he's white, I would avoid trying to get damage, especially if you're melee. It can be quite tough. And then the last phase to memory is the exploding nova phase. There's one phase where he basically jumps towards you, does a massive Nova, and he does this 3 times. Unless he gets staggered, what you can do is you can take turns, like there's a safe spot where you can move left in between all of the shots, then back to their original position, then back left again to dodge everything in those explosions. So while he's doing these phases, there's some changes to the battlefield that you should note and pay attention to, because it can get a lot harder. Initially, it's not too hard. Like while he's black, you'll notice some orbs that spawn around the sides. They do like grenade shots, and there's pet stasis portals later on. While he's black, the pet stasis portals usually shoot more inwards, so you're very safe on the wall. But when he does get white, there's 2 significant phases. I think the first one comes after the first celestial phase, where he actually starts putting down meteors randomly. It's all RNG, so you're just going to have to dodge them, but it's not too bad because you can just run around them. It helps a lot though if you learn the animation of the meteors. The first random meteors come at around 30% of Oryx Free's HP. Then there's a second meteor phase that affects the whole battlefield. Basically, with the second phase, what happens when he's closer to 15% health, he'll start shooting lines of meteors, which can vary in the speed that they go across the map. And sometimes they can go all across the map, while other times they'll start from both ends and meet at the middle. It's important that you cross these as soon as you can to avoid checkmate scenarios. The way I see most people die in the last phase is due to checkmates from the bosses closing in when the meteors are also approaching. The only time you should avoid crossing the meteors is if you're unsure about what the boss is doing, because he could be running into you as you're crossing, which of course would result in another checkmate scenario. Another thing to note is he does these lined phases, the lined meteor phase, every 3 different phases that Oryx does, except for celestial phase. So you can count when the meteor happens, then count him doing 2 phases, and then on the next phase, he will do another line of meteors, where you can attempt to cross as fast as you can. It's also important to try to avoid getting hit by 2 meteors at the same time, because the meteor hitbox is quite, it's not shown accurately. The explosion is actually bigger than the circle. What can happen is if you stand in between 2, you actually get hit by 2 of the meteors, which result in over 400 damage. So key things to remember about the Oryx free fight is make sure to avoid sicken and pet stasis as much as possible, especially when he turns white. You can stand as far away from the boss as you like after you get a good amount of damage. You can get this damage just when he gets countered, and that's enough, and that will make it that you can survive, because to be honest, getting damage on Oryx free in exalted phase, like while he's white, can be very tough, so you can just avoid him entirely if you like. Now, for the toughest phase, the infamous one, the celestial phase. There's been many players looking for cheap ways to pass this phase. Like, I know there's a circling thing you can do, though I'm not 100% sure of the starting spot for this, but I've found consistency, even while being drunk, to just dodge. And I know that sounds dumb and easy, but there's a lot of tips that can make it really easy for you. So first tip, find a carpet. I recommend going to the closest one, but personally I like to run a bit extra to find a carpet with less people on it so I can see the shot that I'm trying to dodge. So the first thing that you'll probably have to dodge is the pet stasis portals. Basically there's pet stasis portals rotating about 2 tiles away from the sides. By standing close to the pet stasis portals, it actually makes it easier to dodge because you'll notice that the shots, there's less of a gap as they move inwards. So if you stand closer, that way you have more chance of dodging them. And what I've found is you can take turns between dodging the pet stasis portals and the Oryx shots. So what happens is the pet stasis portals will come, and then the next one will be rolling around slowly, but during this time Oryx will shoot a volley. What you can do is you can run either closer to Oryx free or further away, closer to the sides of wall, just to dodge that volley. And then watch out for the next pet stasis portal. It's important that you don't stand on the pet stasis portal because it literally will insta-kill you. So try your best to avoid going to the sides. And it's really important that you dodge pet stasis, depending on what pet you have, because the pet stasis in total can do insane damage if you take into account the loss of potential healing. To help with Oryx free in general, and especially Celestial Phase, while the realm's closing, you can stock up on HP pots. You can put HP pots in your inventory by pulling an item from your inventory onto the HP pot on the floor, and it will appear in your inventory, and then you can just pick up the other item again. So make sure to not be too pressured when this phase comes around, don't move unnecessarily because you can tank more shots than needed. And also try not to get off the carpet too much. I noticed that the only times I do fail Celestial is if I sway away from the carpet way too much. It feels like it's a bit more difficult. So try to stay around the carpet area instead of the 45-degree angle between the two. And remember that the Oryx free, you have to worry about his shots every like 5 seconds. There's a new volley, while the pet stasis portals come around roughly the same time, but usually not at the very same time. They take turns, so you have to focus on dodging one each time, and you only have to do it 3 or 4 times in each Celestial phase. This goes for any boss in Realm or any dungeon. The more times you do it, the more times you succeed, the easier it will become. If you haven't finished an 03 yet, take pride in the advances you've made compared to the previous attempts. Every time you hit a personal best, know that eventually you're going to be doing Oryx free close to 100% of the time. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe because I'm going to put out more content like this. If you guys enjoyed this, I actually am really interested in making an Oryx free guide for small groups because that's actually very different.